Hello, my name is Allie, and for my class Art 240, Travel, Culture, and Art, I had the topic to research the Sistine Chapel. I will be discussing the logic, construction, idea, and history behind the Sistine Chapel, as well as the people involved. The Sistine Chapel in Vatican City was erected in 1473 to 81 by the architect Giovanni de' Dolci for Pope Sixtus IV, hence the name. It is famous for its Renaissance frescoes by Michelangelo. The Sistine Chapel is a rectangular brick building with 6 arch windows on each of the 2 main walls and a barrel-vaulted ceiling. The chapel's exterior is drab and unadorned, but its interior walls and ceiling are decorated with frescoes by many Florentine Renaissance masters. A fresco is a painting done rapidly in watercolor on wet plaster on a wall or ceiling so that the colors penetrate the plaster and become fixed as it dries. The frescoes on the side wall of the chapel were painted from 1481 to 83. On the northern wall are 6 frescoes housing the stories of Jesus, dating to 1481 to 82. They include the baptism of Christ, the temptations of Christ, the vocation of the apostles, the Sermon on the Mount, the delivery of the keys, and the Last Supper. The southern wall is decorated with the stories of Moses, painted in 1481 to 1482. Starting from the altar, they include Moses leaving for Egypt, the trials of Moses, the crossing of the Red Sea, the descent from Mount Sinai, the punishment of the rebels, and the testament and death of Moses. Above these works, smaller frescoes between the windows depict various popes. These walls were painted by Perugino, Pinturicchio, Sandro Botticelli, Domenico and Benedetto Ghirlandaio, Cosimo Rosselli, Luca Signorelli, and Bartolomeo della Gatta. On the eastern wall is the resurrection of Christ and the disputation over Moses' body. For great ceremonial occasions, the lowest portions of the side walls were covered with a series of tapestries depicting events from the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles. These were designed by Raphael. The most important artworks in the chapel are the frescoes by Michelangelo on the ceiling and on the west wall behind the altar. The frescoes on the ceiling, collectively known as the Sistine ceiling, were commissioned by Pope Julius II in 1508, and they were painted by Michelangelo in the years from 1508 to 1512. They depict incidents and personages from the Old Testament. The Last Judgment fresco on the west wall was painted by Michelangelo for Pope Paul III in the period from 1534 to 1541. These 2 gigantic frescoes are among the greatest achievements of Western painting. A 10-year-long cleaning and restoration of the Sistine ceiling, completed in 1989, removed several centuries of accumulation of dirt, smoke, and varnish. Cleaning and restoration of the Last Judgment was completed in 1994. You may know what the Sistine Chapel looks like now, and maybe you've heard about it. But as I did some research, I found a few surprise facts along the way. One of which was that Michelangelo wanted nothing to do with the Sistine Chapel ceiling. In 1508, 33-year-old Michelangelo was hard at work on Pope Julius II's marble tomb, a relatively obscure piece now located in Rome's San Pietro in Vincoli Church. When Julius asked the esteemed artist to switch gears and decorate the Sistine Chapel ceiling, Michelangelo balked. For one thing, he considered himself a sculptor rather than a painter, and he had no experience whatsoever with frescoes. He also had his heart set on finishing the tomb. Even as funding for the project dwindled, nevertheless, Michelangelo reluctantly accepted the commission, spending 4 years of his life perched on scaffolding with his brush in hand. He would return intermittently to Julius's monumental tomb over the next few decades. Contrary to popular belief, Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel in a standing position. When they picture Michelangelo creating his legendary frescoes, most people assume he was laying down. But in fact, the artist and his assistants used wooden scaffolds that allowed him to stand upright and reach above their heads. Michelangelo himself designed the unique system of platforms, which were attached to the walls with brackets. The impression that Michelangelo painted on his back might come from the 1965 film The Agony and the Ecstasy, in which Charlton Heston portrayed the genius behind Sistine Chapel's ceiling. Working on the Sistine Chapel was so unpleasant that Michelangelo wrote a poem about his misery. In 1509, an increasingly uncomfortable Michelangelo described the physical strain of the Sistine Chapel project to his friend Giovanni da Pistoia. "I've already grown a goiter from his torture," he wrote in a poem that was surely somewhat tongue-in-cheek. He went on to complain that his stomach squashed under my chin, that his face makes a fine floor for droppings, that his skin hangs loose below me, and that his spine's all knotted from folding myself over. He ended with an affirmation that he shouldn't have changed his day job. "I'm not in the right place. I am not a painter." Michelangelo's masterpiece has proven highly resilient. The Sistine Chapel's frescoed ceiling has held up remarkably well in the 5 centuries since its completion. Only one small component is missing, part of the sky in the panel depicting Noah's escape from the great biblical flood. This section of painted plaster fell to the floor and shattered following an explosion at a nearby gunpowder depot in 1797. Despite the ceiling's apparent hardness, experts worry that foot traffic from the millions of people who visit the Sistine Chapel each year continues to pose a serious threat. Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel art was touched up and stripped down in the 1980s and 1990s. Between 1980 and 1999, experts restored selected artwork in the Sistine Chapel, including Michelangelo's ceiling and his framed fresco known as The Last Judgment, which he created in his later years. Specialists meticulously dissolved layers of grime, soot, and deposits, substantially brightening the colors of the centuries-old painting. The restoration also undid the work of Pope Pius IV, who ordered the placement of fig leaves and loincloths on Michelangelo's nudes during the 1560s. The Sistine Chapel's ceiling's most famous panel might depict a human brain. In the section entitled The Creation of Adam, figures representing God and Adam reach for each other with their arms outstretched. Their almost touching fingers are one of the world's most recognizable and widely replicated images. Some theorists think the scene also contains the unmistakable outline of a human brain, formed by the angels in robes surrounding God. According to Frank Lynn Meshberger, a doctor who pioneered this hypothesis, Michelangelo meant to evoke God's bestowal of intelligence on the first human. New popes are elected in the Sistine Chapel, built in the 1470s under Pope Sixtus IV. From whom it takes its name, the Sistine Chapel is more than just Vatican City's most popular tourist destination. In fact, it serves a crucial religious function. Beginning in 1492, the simple brick building has hosted numerous papal conclaves, during which cardinals gather to vote on a new pope. A special chimney in the roof of the chapel broadcasts the conclave's result, with white smoke indicating the election of a pope, and black smoke signaling that no candidate has yet received a 2/3 majority vote. This work has been and truly is a beacon of our art, and it has brought such benefit and enlightenment to the art of painting that it was sufficient to illuminate a world which for so many hundreds of years had remained in the state of darkness. And, to tell the truth, Anyone who is a painter no longer needs to concern himself about seeing innovations and inventions, new ways of painting poses, clothing on figures, and various awe-inspiring details. For Michelangelo gave to this work all the perfection that can be given to such details. Giorgi Vasari. And without having seen the Sistine Chapel, one can form no appreciable idea of what one man is capable of achieving. Johann Goethe. Thank you.